The views and opinions expressed today on Black Focus Radio are not the views and opinions of the station, its management, or its advertisers. Now, let's get ready to focus on our issues, our solutions, using our voices on Black Focus Radio.
Welcome to Black Focus, the show designed with our community in mind, where we focus on our issues, developing our solutions, using our voices. Central Arkansas, surrounding areas, and the nation. Get ready. Black Focus starts right now. Phone lines open at 855-525-5683. So here's your host, David W. Coleman.
Hey everybody, welcome to Black Focus Radio, our issues, our solutions, our voices. 855-525-5683 is the number. That's how you get in touch with me. Hit me up on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. And of course, you can always catch the show on Facebook. We update the show every Monday, so we have something new in the hopper for you every Monday, and this Monday is no exception. So make sure you spread the word, like, share, and subscribe. We are on the way to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. I guess I probably should have been pushing this long ago. I just really hadn't, but now I am. So make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Hey, on YouTube. Okay, a lot of stuff to talk about. Before we get into that, I want to remind you that this Monday, the 31st, we are launching a contest with Carla Hall from the Food Network. And in this, the link below, you'll be able to click and vote for my products, my food. You'll see pictures of my food. So hopefully you'll do that. You'll see more about that. There's going to be a promo on the way. You'll get all that here in the next day or so. So we got a lot of stuff to talk about today, and we're going to get to Black Facts here in just a moment. But let me just tell you, the thug in chief is talking about giving reparations to the January 6th rioters. We're going to talk about that. Dems and Project 2025. I still marvel at how the Democrats were caught so off guard with this Project 2025 and what is happening right now. Mexico requires papers for Americans coming into their country, and I'm laughing. There was some video. We'll get into that as well. Tons of stuff. Certainly we got to talk about Signalgate. What a joke, and it continues to be laughable if it wasn't so scary. Police guard they guard Tesla's factories and, well, I should say Tesla dealerships, but the irony is they won't guard schools. There's just an irony in that. We'll work that in there. Jazmin Crockett. I tell you, we got a lot of stuff to talk about today. We're going to get into Jazmin Crockett today. She called the governor of Texas, Governor Hot Wheels, and Republicans are mad. We'll get to that here in just a moment. We're going to try to get a follow-up on those black twins, Kadir and Nazir Lewis, who were murdered. Well, let me say, we don't know what happened, but they're claiming that they were allegedly... it was a murder-suicide. I'm not buying that, and a lot of other people aren't either. Marvin Sapp, he's a minister. We don't talk a lot about religious stuff on this show, but look, I'm going in on Marvin Sapp, so y'all stick and stay for that. Funding for the Civil Rights Museum is being cut by the Trump administration here in Washington, in the DMV area. And no doubt, if you have a Civil Rights Museum in a red state, that funding is going to be cut as well. And I say all that to say, how's your boycott going? Yeah, we're still talking about it, okay? And why haven't you boycotted social media? Twitter, X, Facebook. I'm just asking for a friend, so don't get mad at me. So those are all the things that we got on the agenda today. It's going to be a busy show, but right now we need to talk a little bit about Black Facts, and they're going to go into how blacks were here thousands of years before Columbus. Yeah, that's right. So without further ado, here's Black Facts.
Dynamic Black Facts. Our culture, our history, our people.
Christopher Columbus did not discover America. Exactly. I mean, never mind the question of like how you can discover a place where the inhabitants are watching you arrive from the shore. They weren't wearing pants. Is that what somebody said? I like that.
Blacks as we know them are as old as time, and their existence in the civilized world could be traced down to the very early centuries, even before the coming of Christ. Going forward, the conventional history reports that Christopher Columbus discovered America in 1492. And the same history also says that the first black people to arrive America were enslaved Africans brought by Portuguese and Spanish traders in the early 16th century through the transatlantic slave trade. Well, none of these claims are true. We've been fooled all these while, as always has been the case. Interestingly, recent research has proven that some black people had been in America for more than 1,000 years before Columbus ever stepped foot into the American continent. In fact, there is strong evidence pointing to the fact.
What is the main idea in your book, They Came Before Columbus?
The main idea in my book is to show that early America before the coming of Columbus, was a far more complex society than people imagined, and that it involved Africans. Africans came in here. They came in on several occasions. Sometimes these were accidents, sometimes they were on purpose, and that they had an influence, an actual impact and influence upon the formation of certain American civilizations.
When we say pre-Columbus period, what are we talking about?
We're talking about long before 1492. It is absurd, and only fools can still believe that Columbus discovered the Americas in 1492. In fact, Columbus never even came to this continent. Columbus wandered about in the Caribbean islands just on the very edge of the great civilizations.
Shocked? Don't be. It is true. Unraveling the raw truth behind the curtains of history is what we are about today in this video. Journey with us in our quest to find out just who the real lords of the Americas actually are.
So anyway, there were actually many other mariners before Columbus that discovered America as well. Decades earlier, even eons earlier, there were so many people that were coming across these islands and this continent. But it's only been in the last century that evidence has surfaced and continually grown to indicate that many of these pre-Columbian explorers might have come from Africa.
The facts point out that black people actually it was who were in America thousands of years before Columbus. Before we go on, do not forget to support our efforts by hitting the like button before you. Share with your friends and families to keep spreading our eye-opening black narrative, and consider subscribing to stay with us for more if you are yet to. All right, let us dive in, shall we?
That many of these pre-Columbian explorers might have come from Africa. So the first scientist to promote this possibility was Leo Wiener. Born in Russia, Wiener immigrated to the United States in the late 19th century on his way to British Honduras, where he planned to open a vegetarian commune. Well, when that turned out not to be the dream job he expected, he moved back to the United States and he became a professor at Harvard University, as one does. But in his time in Mesoamerica, he started noticing things. There were lots of things that led him to encounter certain discoveries that made him consider that possibly if the origins of American civilization might actually be in Africa. So he observed so many linguistic and botanical and other similarities that between 1920 and 1922, he published an extensive 3-volume piece called Africa and the Discovery of America. Now, unfortunately, this is the 1920s, so as yet, no serious archaeological evidence had been done to, or work had been done to support his botanical theories, because everyone was over raiding tombs in Egypt and things like that. Nod to Howard Carter. So he didn't have a whole lot of other stuff than the names to support him. However, he knew that other clues must exist. For example, he pointed out that Columbus himself was aware that African mariners had preceded him. In his diary of his second voyage, Columbus tells of how the natives of Hispaniola actually had given him gold-tipped metal spearheads that they said were brought by black-skinned people who had come in large boats from the south and southeast. Coincidence? I think not. No. So what's interesting about that, so upon returning to Spain, is that he actually took the spearheads and he sent them away and they had them assayed, and it turned out to be that they These spearheads were covered in this metal this alloy that the inhabitants called guanin, and the metallurgists actually found out that this was an alloy of 32 parts. It was like 18 of gold, 6 of silver, 8 of copper, which, dun dun dun, matched the metal used in spearheads made in Western Africa for thousands of years, as carried by medieval African warriors, including the Mali and the Moors. The West Africans even called this metal guanine, the same name used by the natives of Hispaniola. But nothing more was said about that. Conspiracy. Well, probably because, in the interest of Spain, it was in their best interest that they didn't want to have any challenges to their discovery and the claims of the islands of the West Indies.
You heard that? Yes, it was the black-skinned that had already discovered and populated America for thousands of years, before Columbus sailed there and then landed in the Caribbean by some mistake. Columbus landed in the Americas on October 12th, 1492. He landed at a small island in the Bahamas and had 3 separate trips after that, repeatedly returning to the Bahamas, as well as an island later called Hispaniola, modern-day Haiti, and Dominican Republic. Suffice it to say that he had brought hell to the people who had welcomed him with open arms in the Republic when he got there. This has always been a signature, right?
Christopher Columbus, one of the great European heroes, turns up on the island of Hispaniola. He was welcomed by the native people. They embraced them, they treated them with fantastic hospitality. His soldiers snatched babies from the breasts of their mothers and dashed their heads against the rocks. Children were fed alive to his dogs. Women's breasts were cut off. He decided to hang 13 of the Native Americans in Hispaniola to recreate the crucifixion of Jesus, plus the apostles. It's true that the majority of people died there of disease. Diseases introduced by the Europeans unwittingly, but many others were driven to death through overwork, direct murder, through starvation as their resources were taken away. Columbus insisted that everybody bring him a certain amount of gold, and those who failed to do so had their hands cut off. Some were sent back to their villages with their hands and their noses tied around their necks, having been amputated by his soldiers. And what he did there set the pattern for the genocidal extermination of almost all the Native American peoples. 100 million before Columbus made landfall. By the 19th century, that had come down to less than 1 million across the Americas. Overtly endorsed by such revered figures as George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, who wrote about the necessity of wiping out Native American peoples.
Let us not veer too far away, however, from the actual subject of discourse going forward here. The point being buttressed is, the people who were originally known to have discovered America are not only Africans, but are believed to have also come from Asia some 15,000 years ago, meaning that Europeans or Americans are far from it. However, contrary to popular belief, African American history did not start with slavery in the New World. The history of African presence in America dates back thousands of years before the arrival of Christopher Columbus in 1492. Africans were not just brought to America as slaves during the transatlantic slave trade, but they had actually been living in the Americas long before European colonization. So, while we commend Christopher Columbus for sailing the seas in search of new land on Europe's behalf, it should be recalled that he was not the first to make that journey, as widely untaught evidence exists, suggesting that Africans made it to the Americas after the first Americans arrived on the continent, centuries before Columbus ever did.
As the poem goes, or it should anyway, in 1493, Columbus stole all he could see. Yeah, so on his second voyage, which was 10 times larger than the first, Columbus went on a frantic but unsuccessful island hopping trip to find gold and spices. He carried along several natives from his newly discovered San Salvador, which the inhabitants called Guanahanvi. Another island that the natives pointed out, which was really large, and was called Soameto. Soameto. Now, Columbus continued going around whimsically renaming every island he could find. But, Leo Wiener, being the curious person and the linguist that he was, and the etymologist, he couldn't help noticing that the origin of these many place names and botanical names in Mesoamerica actually sounded distinctly like other languages in Africa, particularly Bantu and even Arabic.
In fact, there are several more overwhelming pieces of evidence showing that black history in the Americas did not start with slavery. For instance, what of the talk about certain plants found today in America and also in Africa?
Wiener and numerous other botanists have also puzzled over the presence of certain plants that predated Columbus but originated in Africa. For example, the calabash bottle gourds. Now, this is a species originally from West Africa where they were well cultivated in America before Europeans arrived. Now, even long before they existed in Indonesia or Polynesia. So, in fact, the Pacific was the last place that bottle gourds actually reached and expanded to. Pardon my covfefe. Well, if it were not for transatlantic trade, pre-Columbian times, it would be very difficult to explain how certain plants, such as the yam, the sweet potato, domesticated cotton, peanuts, and tobacco, reached both West Africa and the Americas.
Africans were adept shipbuilders. They were courageously adventurous, sailing diverse parts with their well-made boats. Different sizes of them. Some housed up to 80 men and some housed much more.
So how do these plants and languages and other cultural elements get to the Americas? Well, some believe, so what's that? Well, you're cheating. Well, some people believe that, over thousands of years, Africans migrated out of Africa and then over the Bering Strait, then down into South America, and things like that. Well, another explanation exists, and so get ready. There you go. Let it out of your system. Awesome. Africans had ships. In fact, they had four kinds of. They had unbelievable. They had a shipload of vessels, and they had away. The anchors way. So, in fact, they had four kinds of vessels, and Nubian pottery. This is an example of Nubian pottery with a painting on it that shows a long-hold pottery art. That shows either a long-hold boat or a papyrus raft or a hauled-out canoe. And then this other painting beside it is from, the first one was from 3000 BC, and this is a bird's eye view of an oared riverboat in Chad. And it dates from 3500 BCE. Now, the Africans of Guinea also had dugout canoes hewn from these monumental trees on the coast there. In 1500, that's just a few years after Columbus's voyage, the Portuguese captain Pacheco Pereira wrote, "In this country can be found the largest canoes made of a single trunk. Some are so large that they hold 80 men." Now, the West Africans were known to lash two dugout canoes together, side by side, and no one questions the seaworthiness of a similar type of Polynesian catamarans. Well, here's a 15th century Portuguese painting of sailing canoes on the Congo estuary. The Portuguese, like Captain Pereira, had heard that African traders were visiting Brazil in the mid-1400s. So to demonstrate that mariners from West Africa could have sailed to the Americas using papyrus vessels as early as 2000 BCE, Norwegian adventurer Tor Heyerdahl actually used ancient shipbuilding techniques in order to construct and sail the Ra 1 and the Ra 2 in 1969 and 70. And generally, some type of sailing vessel will average about 100 miles per day, even without sails.
Africans were in fact so good at what they do that mariners from West Africa would sail to the Americas using papyrus vessels as early as the year 2000 BCE. They were so well skilled in ancient shipbuilding techniques that some of their sailing vessels would average about 100 miles per day, even without sails. And in an ocean current, something like a raft or reed boat can average about 60 miles a day. Historian Amir Ajib reported that voyages west from Mali were happening in the year 1311. And this was a vast 150 years before Columbus.
Now, Islamic historian Amir Hajib reported that voyages west from Mali were happening in the year 1311, just 150 years before Columbus. Now, when he asked the Mali emperor, shown here, incidentally, holding a globe of the world made of solid gold, asked him, well, tell me about this rumor about Atlantic travel. And he said that his predecessor had commissioned an expedition with 200 ships filled with men and a similar number with gold and water and enough provisions for 2 years. And he said, go out and find something. And if you don't come back, so you find something or you run out of food. And unfortunately, only one ship returned, and the captain told the emperor that we sailed for a very long time until we met what seemed like a river with a strong current flowing in the open sea. I was the last ship, and I turned where I was and did not enter the current. The others disappeared. I do not know what became of them.
Overwhelming pieces of evidence. The strongest evidence of African presence in America before Columbus comes from the pen of Columbus himself. According to an American historian and linguist, Leo Weiner of Harvard University, one of the strongest pieces of evidence to support the fact that Africans sailed to America before Christopher Columbus was a journal entry from Columbus himself. In 1920, Leo Weiner, in his book, Africa and the Discovery of America, explained how Columbus noted in his journal that Native Americans had confirmed that
black-skinned people had come from the southeast in boats trading in gold-tipped spears.
It was found also that the ratio of properties of gold, copper, and silver alloy were identical to the spears then being forged in African Guinea. It is said that the inhabitants of Hispaniola were the ones to confirm this to Columbus, as he wrote in his journal of the second voyage. Other explorers like Vasco Núñez de Balboa, a Spanish explorer who was best known for crossing the Isthmus of Panama to the Pacific Ocean in 1513, also reported sighting black people off Panama. There were dark-skinned people in the Caribbean long before the Atlantic slave trade and long before the arrival of Columbus. But there are some historians that say Columbus was misinterpreted. He simply said there were people that painted their skins black, which might suggest that Native Americans were the ones with the painted faces he was referencing. One of the first documented instances of Africans sailing and settling in the Americas were black Egyptians, led by King Ramses III during the 19th dynasty in 1870-92 BC. In fact, in 445 BC, the Greek historian Herodotus wrote of the ancient Egyptian pharaohs' great seafaring and navigational skills. Further concrete evidence noted by an Egyptian chancellor to the King Djoser, Dr. Imhotep, and largely ignored by Eurocentric archaeologists includes Egyptian artifacts found across North America, from the Algonquin writings on the East Coast to the artifacts and Egyptian place names in the Grand Canyon. In 1311 AD, another major wave of African exploration to the New World was led by King Abubakar II, the ruler of the 14th century Mali Empire, which was larger than the Holy Roman Empire. The king sent out 200 ships of men and 200 ships of trade material, crops, animals, cloth, and crucially, African knowledge of astronomy, religion, and the arts. African explorers crossing the vast Atlantic waters in primitive boats may seem unlikely, or perhaps far-fetched to some. But such incredible nautical achievements are not as daunting as they seem, given that numerous successful modern attempts have illustrated that without an oar, rudder, or sail, ancient African boats, including the dugout, would certainly have been able to cross the vast ocean in a matter of weeks. As time allows us to drift further and further away from the European age of exploration, and we move beyond an age of racial intellectual prejudice, historians are beginning to recognize that Africans were skilled navigators long before Europeans, contrary to popular belief. Of course, some Western historians continue to refute this fact because consciously or unconsciously, they are still hanging on to the 19th century notion that seafaring was a European monopoly. After all, history will tell you that seafaring is the quintessential European achievement, the single endeavor of which Europeans are awfully proud of. Seafaring allowed Europe to conquer the world. So the notion that black Africans braved the roaring waters of the Atlantic Ocean and beat Europeans to the New World threatens a historically white sense of ownership over the seas. Also, when most people think about ancient Mexico, the first civilizations that come to mind are the Incas, Aztecs, and the Maya. However, during the early 1940s, archaeologists uncovered a civilization known as the Olmecs of 1200 BCE, which predated any other advanced civilization in the Americas. The Olmec civilization was one of the most well-known examples of early African presence in America. The civilization, which was of African origin and dominated by Africans, was the first significant civilization in Mesoamerica and considered the mother culture of Mexico by many historians. This civilization existed between 1200 to 400 BCE in the areas that are known today as the states of Veracruz and Tabasco. One of the main things this civilization is known for is the gigantic stone head carving of their leaders. The carvings clearly depict African faces. This civilization was also responsible for introducing written language, arts, and mathematics to Mesoamerica civilization. The first of these gigantic stone heads were discovered by explorer Jose Melgar in Veracruz in 1862. He wrote,
"What astonished me was the Ethiopic type which it represents. I reflected that there had undoubtedly been blacks in this country."
At this point, the Olmec people were known for their advanced agricultural practices, monumental stone sculptures, and complex social structures. Many historians and archaeologists believe that the Olmec civilization was influenced by African cultures, as evidenced by the similarities in their art and religious practices. Enormous Olmec head statues with African facial characteristics found throughout Central and South America support that Africans had settled in America long before its apparent discovery. Ranging up to 11.15 feet in height and weighing 30 to 40 tons, these statues generally depict helmeted black men with large eyes, broad, fleshy noses, and full lips. An ancient African historian, Professor Van Sertima, has also illustrated how Olmecs were the first Mesoamerican civilization to use a written language, sophisticated astronomy, arts, and mathematics, and they built the first cities in Mexico, all of which greatly influenced the Mayans and subsequent civilizations in the Americas. Michael Coe, a leading historian in Mexico, once remarked,
"There is not the slightest doubt that all later civilizations in Mexico and Central America rest ultimately on an Olmec base."
Another clear indicator of pre-Columbian African transatlantic travel is the recent archaeological findings of narcotics native to America and ancient Egyptian mummies, which have astounded contemporary historians. German toxicologist Svetla Balabanova reported findings of cocaine and nicotine in ancient Egyptian mummies. These substances are known to only be derived from American plants, South American cocaine from Erythroxylon coca, and nicotine from Nicotiana tabacum. Such compounds could only have been introduced to ancient Egyptian culture through trade with Americans. Similarities across early American and African religions also indicate significant cross-cultural contact. The Mayans, Aztecs, and Incas all worship black gods, and the surviving portraits of the black deities are revealing. For instance, ancient portraits of the Quetzalcoatl, a serpent god, and Ecahua, the god of war, are unquestionably Negro with dark skin and woolly hair. Now, why would Native Americans venerate images so unmistakably African if they had never even seen them before? Numerous wall paintings in caves in Juxtlahuaca, southwestern Mexico, depict the famous ancient Egyptian opening of the mouth and cross-libation rituals. All these religious similarities are too large and occur far too often to be mere coincidences. Professor Everett Borders, a U.S. innovator, notes another very important indication of African presence, which is the nature of early American pyramids. Egypt is famous for ancient pyramids, but the Americas actually have more pyramids than any other place in the world. But the Egyptian pyramids are much older and show signs of progress from the earliest pyramids built to the more sophisticated and enormous pyramids that are now famous. However, the pyramids found in Central America do not show the same level of progress. That suggests that whoever built the American pyramids had already mastered pyramid building by the time those pyramids were built, which points the finger to Africans who likely sailed over to the Americas with that knowledge and constructed them in America. The earliest known pyramid in the Americas is found in Tabasco, Mexico, and was built by the Olmecs, the same civilization known for the gigantic stone heads. Therefore, the great ancient civilizations of Egypt and West Africa traveled to the Americas, contributing immensely to early American civilization by importing the art of pyramid building, political systems, and religious practices, as well as mathematics, writing, and a sophisticated calendar. Furthermore, archaeologists have discovered ancient skulls and skeletons that they believe belong to people of African descent. In a 1975 publication by the New York Times, it is stated that a Smithsonian Institution team reported finding 2 Negro male skeletons in the U.S. Virgin Islands. The soil from the earth layers in which the skeletons were found was dated around 1250 AD. Polish professor Andrzej Wiercinski has also testified to the discovery of African skulls at Olmec sites. More ancient skeletons that archaeologists believe are Africans have also been discovered in other locations in Central and South America, further pointing to the fact that Africans had known America's soils way longer than we were made to believe. Most historians, archaeologists, anthropologists, and other scientists and scholars now know that Christopher Columbus didn't discover America. Not only were Native Americans present when he reached the New World, but also Chinese, Phoenicians, and Europeans, among others, had been sailing to the Americas thousands of years before Columbus ventured across the Atlantic. Adding to these facts is a recent book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence, written by a brilliant African-American scholar, David Imhotep. Imhotep's thesis is by far the most revolutionary viewpoint ever published on this subject. Unlike his predecessors, he does not claim that Africans simply sailed to the Americas before Columbus and influenced the Native Americans who resided in the New World. No, he states instead that the Native Americans themselves were black Africans who first reached the New World at least 56,000 years ago. Dr. Imhotep shows that there were two major groups that populated ancient America. The first were black Africans who had begun sailing to the New World tens of thousands of years ago. They were short people who appeared to have been the ancestors of modern pygmies. According to Dr. Imhotep, the second group to reach the Americas in ancient times were the Mongolians, who first arrived about 3000 BC. They traveled from Asia across the Bering Strait down through Canada and into North America. There they met Africans who had preceded them. Some Mongolians mixed with the indigenous African, others conquered or exterminated the black people. The black and Mongolian mixture resulted in what we know today as the Red Indian, in other words, the Indian on the original American nickel. The Indian of our school textbooks and the Indian of Hollywood fame do not represent the original Native American. They were indeed early Americans, but they were descendants of indigenous Africans, that is, the first Americans and invading Mongolians. The earliest and most pervasive evidence of their presence are the strange structures called Native American mounds. Built by black Africans, these structures still survive in 41 states of North America. One such mound, the Cahokia of Illinois, is almost as large as the Great Pyramids of Egypt. Additionally, when you consider all the evidence so far mentioned, with the fact that ancient Africans were masters at shipbuilding, it is no brainer that they more than likely made it to the Americas from West and North Africa long before Columbus did. Shipbuilding and sailing have a history of over 20,000 years in the Sahara. There are cave wall paintings of ancient ships documenting this tradition. Ancient Egyptians were pioneers in shipbuilding. One example of this is the ancient Egyptian king Khufu's ship, which is a vessel that is 44 meters long and was buried at the foot of the Khufu's Great Pyramid in Giza. Around 2500 BC, Tai was discovered with its structure still intact in 1954. Furthermore, ancient transatlantic similarities in botany, religion, and pyramid building constitute but a fraction of the signs of African influence in ancient America. Historically, the African people have been exceptional explorers and purveyors of culture across the world. Throughout all of these travels, African explorers have not had a history of starting devastating wars on the people they met. The greatest threat towards Africa having a glorious future is her people's ignorance of Africa's glorious past. Pre-Columbian civilization in the Americas had its foundation built by Africans and developed by the ingenuity of Native Americans. Sadly, America, in post-Columbus times, was founded on the mass killing of the indigenous Americans, built on the backs of African slaves, and continues to run on the exploitation of workers at home and abroad. Sad also is the fact that despite this evidence of early African presence in America, the history of African contributions to the development of the Americas has often been overlooked or marginalized. The legacy of slavery and racism has obscured the true extent of African influence on American culture, society, and history. In truth, Africans began coming to the Americas thousands of years before Columbus, and the evidence of their presence, though systematically ignored by mainstream and K-12 education curriculum, is overwhelming and undeniable. Even early Mexican scholars were convinced that the impact of the black explorers on the New World was profound and enduring. One author, J. Villacorta, would write,
"Any way you view it, Mexican civilization had its origin in Africa."
Indian scholar Rafiq Jairasboy would appear to have been right when he also wrote,
"The black began his career in America not as slave, but as master."
Clearly, Africans helped civilize America a great deal before Europeans discovered America, and well before Europeans claimed to have civilized Africa. the growing body of evidence is now becoming simply too loud to ignore. Hence, it's about time education policymakers re-examine their school curriculums to adjust for America's long pre-Columbian history. To close this, the history of blacks in America extends far beyond the arrival of Columbus in 1492. Glaring evidence suggests that African people were present in the Americas thousands of years before European colonization.
Keep listening to Black Focus Radio for more dynamic Black facts, our culture, our history, our people on joynetradio.com.
All right, welcome back to the show. That Black Fact was a little longer than normal, but I wanted to go ahead and get that in. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in a moment. You're listening to Black Focus Radio, our issues, our solutions, our voices on joynetradio.com.
Hi, I'm David W. Coleman, host of Black Focus Radio and the Weekly Sports Magazine. We here at joynetradio.com would like to thank you for all the love and support you've given us. Our goal is to keep you inspired and informed daily with quality programming from gospel music, news, talk, and sports. Log on to joynetradio.com for the program lineup, and while there, be sure to make a donation. Then download our app and carry us anywhere in the world. Please continue to spread the word about joynetradio.com. And if you are an entrepreneur or have an upcoming event or you'd like to start a show, let the professional writers and producers here at joynetradio.com help you get the word out. Call me at 615-554-0568 for more details. In the meantime, stay informed and inspired daily right here on joynetradio.com.
Welcome back to Black Focus Radio, our issues, our solutions, our voices. 855-525-5683 is the number. That's how you get in touch with me if you'd like to join the show. Sporting my chef jacket today because we are getting ready to enter this Carla Hall food contest. I need you to go out and support it. In this link, you will see a link where you can go out and vote for all of that stuff. So make sure you vote for me. I appreciate it. I could use the 25K. But not only that, I just have fun just doing it as well. So anyway, a lot of stuff to talk about this hour. I want to start off with the boycott. I haven't heard much about a boycott lately. I said, and I've been telling you what needs to be boycotted is college athletics. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. The billions of dollars that black boys and black girls, I should say black young men and women, are now earning for these red states. And they continue to insult us. And right now, I asked the question in the preview, why aren't you boycotting social media? Now, I know I do my show on social media, but places like X and Facebook, all of those guys who showed up at the inauguration who are basically kowtowing to the criminal in chief, why aren't we boycotting that? And by the way, why aren't y'all even talking about boycotting anymore? It doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. And it continues. And I'm going to give you two things why you should be boycotting Donald Trump and making sure that your voice is still being heard. Let's start off with the January 6th reparations. You say, well, what are the January 6th reparations? Well, last week, we all know what happened January 6, 2020, right? Where Donald Trump tried to overthrow the government along with a lot of his cronies. And I say cronies, all of his buddies, all of his supporters. They went to Washington, D.C., and I don't need to go into details on what happened because we all saw it. Killed policemen, injured policemen, tore up the Capitol, defecated in the Capitol. It was just an abomination. Many of those people were sent to jail and were serving long prison terms. And then come 2024, when many of you did not vote or forgot to vote or just simply abdicated your responsibilities as an American citizen and didn't vote, and allowed Donald Trump to be reelected again. And one of the first things that he did was free all of those criminals. Now, it shouldn't have surprised you because, number one, he was talking about he was going to free them, number one. And then number two, what would you expect a criminal to do? Now, I mentioned last show that I've been watching Daredevil. And Daredevil is one of my favorite Marvel comic book characters from way back in the day. And Wilson Fisk, who is the criminal mastermind, who is now the mayor of New York, kind of reminds me, or at least it parallels what is going on with the Trump administration. Now, the difference is that you don't have a daredevil in real life that can go and kick Trump's butt, and it wouldn't take much anyway because he's a wimp, but it sort of daredevils the good and the evil that is in government. And so now we know that Donald Trump is going to, we know he's already let go or pardoned all of those January 6th thugs. A couple of them have already gotten back in trouble. One of them was killed by police because he was trying to talk crap to the police and the police wasn't having it, and they shot him and killed him. But more importantly, the reason I'm bringing this up is because what's disturbing to me, and this ties into reparations, what's disturbing to me is that last week Donald Trump decided that, or at least he suggested, that he wanted to give reparations to the January 6th criminals. He wanted to find some way, and he was on some right-wing news outlet, and the guy brought up the fact, well, these people have lost so much and lost so much in their jobs and money, and they started talking about reparations. Boy, did that insult me. I mean, you can't insult me anymore as it relates to Donald Trump, but it did insult me, to say the least. So what can be done about it? Well, you can certainly protest. Now, from what I understand, there's a protest that is happening on April 5th, I believe it is, but black people ain't going. I'm telling you right now, black people don't go in any white people's protest. You should have been protesting your asses at the polls instead of now you're trying to protest. What black people need to do is start boycotting them. From what we understand, Target has been crippled. They're hurting. So that one-day boycott worked. So what we've got to do is continue these boycotts. We've got to continue them. Like I said, you gotta boycott X. You got to boycott Facebook. I'm all for it. Like I said, I post on social media on a regular basis, but yeah, I don't mind boycotting it. Right now, I'm boycotting the NCAA tournament because that's one of the tools that we can use, college sports, to boycott. I took the liberty a couple of weeks ago to remind you about the University of Missouri. So those of you who said a boycott will not work, I brought you prima facie evidence. 2016, the University of Missouri did boycott and it worked. So it will work. It's just, do we have the courage? And I ask all the time, do the children of our ancestors have courage? Because it doesn't seem that they do. They're so caught up now in materialism that they don't understand that their rights are about to be taken away from you. Because we're going to talk more about this as we go on throughout the show. But I wanted to ask you the question. One reason why you should boycott, because it is a slap in every black man's face if Donald Trump gives reparations to January 6th protesters for attacking the Capitol. It's similar to what they did to the South. If you know a little bit about the history, then the South got reparations. The black people didn't. Black people were promised 40 acres and a mule. They got none of that. But white slave owners got all kinds of reparations from the federal government. Are we reliving this all over again, and are we going to let this happen? That's the question. He's going to slap you in the face. Here is the other thing that they're trying to do. I don't know if you all have had the opportunity to go to the beautiful National Civil Rights Museum in Washington, D.C. It is a beautiful monument. It is a national treasure. And many cities across the country have civil rights museums dedicating and talking about the contributions of black people. Well, also late last week, the criminal-in-chief decided that he's going to sign an executive order that will kill the funding to the Smithsonian and the National Civil Rights Museum. You get this, right? So what they're basically trying to do is erase history. This was the whole thing behind why they got so upset about the 1619 project. Because now that you can go out on, see, they can erase books. They can change textbooks. But as I've told you all over and over again, Google is a wonderful tool. And what you've got to simply do is start making sure that your children are getting their Black history. I've said over and over again that churches ought to be teaching Black history instead of trying to extort their members. Marvin Sapp. We're going to talk about that here in a little bit. So that's just two of the many things that they are trying to do to Black people. They're basically trying. And look, you said, well, why are they doing this? We've talked about this over and over again. 2042, they're going to be minorities. They are trying to basically brainwash Black people into believing that they had no history. They're trying to brainwash a lot of our young people. They're attacking schools, they're attacking colleges, they're attacking textbooks, they're attacking museums, anything that has a different and, let me say, a more precise story of history, they are attacking it. And what are we doing? Nothing. All of this is part of the Project 2025 playbook, which still perplexes me how Democrats were caught so unawares of this playbook. I'm just still stunned. It wasn't until late into the campaign that they even began to talk about this. And we're now seeing all of this come to fruition. What were y'all thinking? Where were y'all at? This is why that old leadership needs to go. But I digress. So I started off talking about why this should mean boycott. The only thing that they understand is money. If you look at right now, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, the stock exchange, all of that stuff, Standards and Poor's, all of that is in the red right now. They're beginning to panic. They're beginning to worry. And here's the Trump administration telling people, oh, well, just hang on. It's going to be okay. And even, is it Kudlow, the Commerce Secretary, who is a billionaire, by the way, said that it was okay if people miss a few checks. He's a billionaire. He's never had to live from paycheck to paycheck. So clearly he doesn't care about you guys. So why aren't you boycotting? What is it going to take? Your price in food is about to go up. Your price in cars, if these tariffs go through, will add $5,000 to $10,000 more to the price of cars. This is not going to get any better anytime soon. The only thing that we can hope for is that the good Lord decides to say, Donald, we've had enough of you. Goodbye. But you can't guarantee that. So one of the ways that you can make your voice heard is to do the B thing, the B word, and that's boycott. You know, look, just like you, many of you have watched a lot of the college basketball. I did watch one game. I did watch the Razorbacks, so I'll be honest with that. But I hadn't watched much. But I know the games that I watched, whole lot of Black kids running up and down those basketball courts. Whole lot. Hello? Millions of dollars is being earned, not just by those kids, but by those schools and those coaches. You see, until we get serious about this boycott, they're going to continue to do this because they don't care. They've proven to you that they don't care. Okay? They simply don't care. So the bottom line is this. We've got to make a decision here. We got to fight back. And we're not going to fight back with guns because, see, here's what they're doing. You know, I read something the other day that they're even trying to get together a Continental Congress where they're trying to roll back a lot of the civil rights and change a lot of the amendments. Now, you have to have 32 states to even convene a Continental Congress, or I should say, what do they call it? A constitutional convention, I should say. And you have to have 38 states to ratify anything that comes out of that. But the point is that they are doing and pulling all kinds of strings to try to change this country because they're afraid. They know for a fact that they are going to be the minorities. And the only way that they can save themselves is try to change the country. This is why Donald Trump was elected. It had nothing to do with food prices. For the first time, we're seeing I guess you could say, the KKK is literally in the White House. Is literally in the White House. So it's not going to be good anytime soon. We are in a heap of trouble. But I wanted to lead the show off today because my call for reparations, or I should say my call for boycotting these schools, is still in effect. I know no one's listening, no one cares, but we've got to start paying attention to this. We should be sitting down right now, strategizing. You see, the reason the Civil Rights era was successful is that SNCC, the Black Panther Party, the SCLC, the NAACP, the Urban League, and all of those organizations came together and they strategized on what their next move was. They were not depending on politicians. Speaking of which, politicians, we're gonna talk about Jazmin Crockett when we come back. We'll take a break. You're listening to Black Focus Radio. Our issues, our solutions, our voices on joynetradio.com.
Listen! Did you miss Dr. Ernest Gill from UT San Antonio?
When you're making $455 million off these student athletes and all you can come up with is $5,000, John Calipari makes $8 million a year and his players are going to get $5,000 a year. The majority of these teams were white men and white males and females. Would this be happening? And I would say no, because their families wouldn't let it happen. But we're letting our kids get pimped.
Join the weekly sports magazine every Saturday, 8 to 10 a.m. on joynetradio.com.
All right, welcome back to the show, Black Focus Radio. Our issues, our solutions, our voices. 855-525-5683 is the number. That's how you get in touch with me if you'd like to join the show. A lot of stuff to talk about today. We're talking a little bit this segment about Jazmin Crockett. We've seen Jazmin Crockett. Of course, she's a state representative from Texas. She's been raising holy hell up there as it relates to what's going on in Washington, D.C. And last week, a lot of people try to, and it's amazing how these Republicans, and that's what I'm calling them now, are so sensitive about what she said about Governor Greg Abbott of Texas. And I thought it was hilarious. And so Jazmin Crockett called him Governor Hot Wheels. Of course, you know, Greg Abbott is paralyzed and he's in a wheelchair. So all of these Republicans are upset with Jazmin Crockett. And my question is, why are you all upset with Jazmin Crockett? And I saw some right-wing reporter stalking her in the halls of the Capitol, trying to ask her, well, why don't you just apologize? No, Jazmin, don't apologize. It's time to fight fire with fire, and you are one of the few, the very few that are actually doing that on Capitol Hill. Now, I don't particularly care for the name calling, but let me tell you something. You have a criminal in chief who has spent his last 2 presidential campaigns calling Democrats all kinds of names, attacking judges, doing everything that he wanted to do and saying everything that he wanted to say about officials in the government. Not one Republican, not one, said, hey, he needs to stop. Oh, I'm not going to support him if he continues to do that. But here's Jazmin Crockett, who calls Greg Abbott Governor Hot Wheels, and all of a sudden you want him to apologize. See, this is the hypocrisy that I'm talking about as it relates to these people. Okay? They're no good. They're a double standard. Everything. Look, judges are great when they rule in their favor. That is the right wing favor, but they're terrible when they rule against them. Donald Trump called Hillary, Marco Rubio, all of his opponents, all kinds of names, and continues to do so. So why would Jazmin Crockett have to apologize for what she said about Greg Abbott? Sorry. You know, you don't like it? Well, calm your president down. Until he stops calling names, we gonna call him names. But see, here's the thing. We don't really have to call Donald Trump names because his persona, his actions fit the names that he is being called. His actions. He's 34 convictions of felonies. 34 felonies. Okay? He's a woman abuser. He's a liar. The list goes on and on. He's a criminal in chief. Pick any name that you want to call him, and it will be apropos. Period. Don't get mad. That's just a fact. So for people to be going after Jazmin Crockett, that dog ain't gonna hunt. That dog ain't gonna hunt. So I saw a post on Facebook, and it was posted by a white boy. You see, this is how they do. This is how they try to divide and conquer. They said Jazmin Crockett didn't grow up in the hood. She grew up in a nice neighborhood and went to a private school. But, so I went out and clicked on his post and tried to see who he was, and sure enough, he was a white boy. Now, why was he posting that on a black post? Because he was trying to divide and conquer. And as I posted back to him, I said, it doesn't matter what hood you grew up in, you still grew up in the hood. In fact, you grew up in a hood, or were you born in a barn? That's still your hood. But there he was trying to make hay and cast aspersions on Jazmin Crockett because she didn't grow up. And by the way, what really offended me about that post is the fact that you assume that every black person grew up in the hood. Okay? I didn't grow up in the hood. I grew up in a house, a nice neighborhood. Yeah, there were some housing developments 3 or 4 blocks away from me, but I grew up in a nice neighborhood. So for that white boy to assume that every black person grows up in the ghetto, this is the problem that you have with white people and their racism. But it was even more than that, because he was simply trying to divide us as it relates to Jazmin Crockett. And I support Jazmin Crockett. I support AOC. I support any of these new guys and gals who are changing the dynamics and changing the thought process and the concepts of what it means to, number one, be a Democrat, and number two, not take all of these punches laying down, Chuck Schumer. You know you did. So no, you're not going to change my mind about Jazmin Crockett. You're not going to change my mind about supporting Jazmin Crockett and any other black person who decides to stand up against Donald Trump. It's just simply not going to happen. And I hope more get on the ball and start calling this president and his cronies what they are. They are a cult. They are white supremacists. They are people who don't particularly care about anything that isn't white. And they don't really care about their women because they're being handed a shock, killing DEI programs, not understanding that the majority of the people who benefited from DEI programs were white women. Something like 65%. But I support Jazmin Crockett. I hope you'll support Jazmin Crockett. And let's keep this thing moving. Let's keep this thing moving. And more importantly, I hope you're going to the polls and getting ready to vote, because they are also trying to pass legislation to affect how you vote. Another executive order by the criminal in chief. When is this going to end? Well, it doesn't seem like it's going to end anytime soon. So again, we're back to my original statement that I made weeks ago, or I should say question. Are black descendants of the civil rights ancestors? Do they have the courage that those ancestors had? Do they have the courage? Because, see, what you have right now, young black person, is because someone decided to march. Someone decided to sit in a Woolworth and have be spat on, and cigarette ashes poured on them, and ice cream and milk poured on them. Someone decided that they were going to have dogs sicked on them. They were going to stand the test of time. Someone decided that they were going to battle the water hoses that were turned against them. Some of them decided to walk into schools that they could not get into. For you to be able to do what you do today, for you to be able to walk as a free human being today. Do you have the courage? Because I'm going to tell you, we need you right now. We don't need you marching. We need you organizing. We need you trying to put together things that are going to combat this bigotry and racism. And the only way you're going to do that is you've got to affect their pocketbooks. That's the only way. Okay? That's the only way. We've got to do this. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. We got to take the top of the hour break. We'll be back in a moment. We've got more to share with you today. It's called Black Focus Radio. Our issues, our solutions, our voices. We're going to talk about Signalgate when we come back. We're also going to talk about Marvin Sapp and the $40,000 hostage negotiation, which was pretty pathetic. All of that and more. It's called Black Focus Radio. Our issues, our solutions, our voices, right here on joynetradio.com.
The views and opinions expressed today on Black Focus Radio are not the views and opinions of the station, its management, or its advertisers. Now, let's get ready to focus on our issues, our solutions, using our voices on Black Focus Radio.
Welcome to Black Focus, the show designed with our community in mind, where we focus on our issues, developing our solutions, using our voices. Central Arkansas, surrounding areas, and the nation. Get ready. Black Focus starts right now. Phone lines open at 855-525-5683. So here's your host, David W. Coleman.
All right, welcome back to the second hour of Black Focus Radio. Our issues, our solutions, our voices. 855-525-5683 is the number. That's how you get in touch with me if you'd like to join the show. So this hour, this segment, I want to talk a little bit about Marvin Sapp, if you all haven't seen this. And I'm going to relay a story to you, probably the last time I was a member of a church, but I think you're going to find it interesting. So, let me start off by telling you this story. A few years ago, my kids were very young. My daughter had to be probably about, she had to be probably about 8 or 9. My son was probably about 2 years old. And I was having some difficult times. I had just went through a divorce. I was living in Nashville. I was running up and down the highway, trying to see my son because I had went through a terrible custody battle. And during this time period, I was a member of the Temple Church in Nashville, Tennessee. I had went to pick up my daughter from Little Rock because she was moving to Nashville. And she had been in Little Rock for the summer. And this was one of the times where I really did not have any money. Didn't have any cash at all. I'm just going to be honest with you. School was starting. I had $35 to my name. I couldn't buy school supplies or anything. So this was the time I was going to church. And I will tell you that the late Dr. Michael Lee Graves, I owe him a world of gratitude. One of the very few ministers that I've met in my life that really practiced what he preached. So We got back on a Saturday night, late Saturday night. I didn't have any food. I was trying to figure out how I was going to buy food and school supplies with $35. I was distraught. So I went to church the next morning, to the Temple Church in Nashville, Tennessee, and sat through the sermon, and I took my baby girl with me. And my baby girl, I purposely let her sleep in because I didn't want her to wake up and ask for breakfast because I didn't have any breakfast. Okay? So I got her up, got her dressed quickly, just in time enough so we could get to church on time. I told her we'd get some food when we get back. She said, Daddy, I'm hungry. I said, I know, baby girl, but we're running late. I want to get to church. So I got to church, and I was distraught. I didn't know. I was praying and hoping that God would, help a brother out, and didn't know where it was going to come from. So at the end of service, Dr. Graves told the church members to lock the doors. I don't want to, and throughout the sermon he was saying, don't leave today, you're going to get a blessing. There's someone in here that needs to be blessed. So don't leave. Usually after service, people are jumping up, they run into the cars trying to get out of there. We had 2,000 members, well, 3,500 members to be totally honest. And we had to have 2 services. So we sat there. And he said, ushers, I need you to bring 3 tables down to the front. And he did. And they did. So he began to pray and talk about the goodness of God and so on and so forth. And he said, now, somebody in here needs a blessing. And what I need you all to do, I want you to look in your purses and look in your wallets. And if you have any dollars, anything green that you can afford, I want you to bring it down here and put it on this table. He said, I'm going to show you how God works. This was one of the most profound services that I had ever been in. And I had been in a lot throughout my life. He said, somebody out there needs a utility bill paid. Somebody out there needs food. Somebody out there needs just a blessing. They need to be able to pay their rent. He said, all of these people in here, I know you've got something that you can come down here and put on these tables. He said, I promise you that God is going to multiply it for you. People started getting up and walking down and putting greenbacks on those 3 tables. He stood in the middle of one. And I always sat pretty close to the front. I was probably 5 or 6 rows from the front, sitting on the inside. And I was sitting there. And I was in tears because I knew I needed a blessing. And I had that $35 in my pocket. Okay? And my baby girl reached over to me and whispered to me, Daddy, I'm hungry. I said, okay, baby girl, we'll be leaving here in just a moment. Sermon's almost over. Reverend Grace kept talking. He kept encouraging people to get up and bring some money down there. My baby girl reached over to me again and said, Daddy, I'm hungry. I said, I know, baby girl, just hang on. By this time, I had gotten up. I had taken $20. I only had $35. I had $15 left. And I took $20 and I went down there and put it on that table. And I was in tears. And afterwards, he stopped. He said, okay, has everybody brought what they can? And by this time, money was stacked up high. Reverend Graves was a tall guy. It had stacked up to his chin on all 3 of those tables. He said, now, watch how God works. He says, somebody in here needs a blessing. Somebody in here can't pay their rent, can't pay their utilities, can't buy food. School's starting, you need school supplies. I want you to get up right now and come down here and take some money off this table. Get whatever you need. I sat there. He said, and everybody else sat there because this was a prideful church. This was one of the richest churches in Nashville. So nobody wanted to get up and be shown that they needed money. He said it again. I know you're out here. I need you to get up, come back here, and get some of this money. Come on. One person got up. 2 people got up. They went down and got some of the money. There were tears of joy and prayers going up and hallelujahs and everything. It was a wonderful sight. I'm in tears right now. I'm still sitting. Reverend Gray said again, this is the 3rd time I'm going to say this. Somebody out there needs some of this money. I want you to get up and come down here and get it. When he finished that time, my baby girl reached over to me and tugged on my coat and said, Daddy, I'm hungry. And before I knew it, I was up out of my seat and I had went down there and I started talking to Reverend Graves. And I said, Reverend Graves, I don't really need this money. I just need a little bit. He said, I don't care, son. He said, hold your hands out. Hold your arms out. And he just took his arms and he scooped up all of that money that was in front of him and put it in my arms. Well, I won't say all of it, but quite a bit of it. And I broke into tears. And some of the deacons pulled me aside and they were getting the money out of my hands and folding it and giving it to me. And before I knew it, I had money for my daughter. Now, why am I telling you this story? Because Marvin Sapp did something the other day that has shocked us all. Something that he should have never done. And I'm going to expound on it a little bit more, but we need to go ahead and take our first break. But I'll tell you, that day, that was the best time of my life in any church that I had ever attended. When I got home, by the way, just to finish the story, I'm in tears. I was able to go and buy food for my daughter. I left the church that day with like $343. That was everything that he had scooped up and put in my arms. When I got home, I was checking my coat pockets and there was money in my coat pockets, another $100 that some of the church members had slipped in my pocket when I was emotional. Didn't even know it. All they knew that there was this man who had this cute little girl and this little boy, single dad, trying to make a difference in the community. And he was struggling and no one knew it. Because of my pride. So I wanted to tell that story because Marvin Sapp locked the church doors. Reverend Graves did too, but those were 2 different situations. I'm going to take a break. We'll be back in a moment to finish this story. It's called Black Focus Radio, our issues, our solutions, our voices on joinedradio.com.
Bake it, grill it, smoke it. Oh yeah, at RearBrub.com. Holman's Dynamic Pepper Juice is lighting fires around the country. It's the new product from RearBrub.com. Use it on meats and vegetables. Add it to your gumbos and greens for an extra punch. Made with all natural ingredients, Coleman's Dynamic Pepper Juice will enhance the flavors of your favorite recipes. Order today on RearBrub.com. And while there, be sure to check out some of our other great products. It's developed with love and care using the best all-natural ingredients with no GMOs or preservatives. From snacks to seasonings, Coleman's Dynamic Products has something for everyone. Bake it, grill it, smoke it. Oh yeah, at RearBrub.com.
Hey, beautiful. You look gorgeous. Are you doing something different? There's a healthy glow about you.
Thanks. I'm just my natural self.
Come on. What's your secret?
Okay. Since I found Skintentional.com, I've been getting a lot of those comments.
Skintentional.com?
Yes, SkinTentional.com is handcrafted, luxurious natural baths and body care products. Crafted for those with a designer's taste for high-quality skincare products but won't break your bank. From body butter to oils and soaps, SkinTentional has something for everyone, including the man in your life. Get your man some beard balm and oils. And yes, they offer body butters and soap for him as well, without making him smell like flowers. Go to SkinTentional.com and check out their amazing products. They believe self-care should be an intentional and joyous experience for all. SkinTentional.com.
Pigskin, check. Round ball, check. Hard ball, check. Hockey puck, check. Burning rubber, check. We got it all on the weekly sports page with David Coleman. What else do you need? Did I say food? Can't have sports without food. What kind of show is this again?
A sports show.
Oh, okay. Pass me those rib nuts.
Yeah, we do have it all and a whole lot more with me, Dynamic David Coleman, on the weekly sports magazine.
I should say, when you see this posting, you will see the link where you can go out and post yourself, okay, and vote for my food. So, we are talking about Marvin Sapp, and I just gave you a wonderful story. In fact, this was the only time that I know of that I've been involved where a pastor locked the doors and would not let anyone leave. And it was a wonderful, wonderful event that occurred that I just described that I was part of. Now, I wasn't the only one who was able to get money off of those tables. Quite a few people did. It was just amazing. You know, you don't really know what's going on with people sometimes when they go to these churches. You know, we go and we all gussied up and we look good, and I was dressed up nice that day, but I was a troubled young man. And Michael Lee Graves over and over exhibited his love for me as a church member and as a human being, and that day was one of them. But last week, Marvin Sapp, you all know Marvin Sapp. He's a prominent preacher and singer, gospel artist, you name it. Has been in the gospel business for a long time. And I know there were a lot of friends of mine who are ministers cringed at what happened last week. There are a lot of friends of mine who are ministers who are doing yeoman's work out there trying to feed the hungry and help the poor. But what Marvin Sapp did last week is an abomination to your God. Now, I'm going to tell you, I'm no longer a Christian. The last instance of me going to church was at the Temple Church in Nashville. That was years ago. And I will say that I really wasn't Christian then. I was just a believer. But I still had questions. What Marvin Sapp did, if you really believed in Jesus or Christianity, then what Marvin Sapp did last week was an abomination. Let me tell you the story. Apparently, there was not enough offering that was being taken up by Marvin Sapp and his ushers. So he locked the doors and basically kidnapped a whole congregation of people and said he wanted to raise $40,000. Now, you can argue what the $40,000 were for. I really don't care. But to lock people into the sanctuary and decide that they were not going to leave until he got $40,000 was pathetic. If you were trying to recruit people to churches, what Marvin Sapp did, it's not going to work. Now, we see white ministers doing this stuff all the time. So, are you saying now that black ministers are just as bad as white ministers? In some respect, they are. Because many would argue that being a minister is nothing more than being a flim-flam man. That's why a lot of black males don't go to churches anymore. That old saying, game knows game, and a lot of black males believe that many of these preachers are doing nothing more than running game. You throw in the historical connection with Christianity and Africans, then you really have a problem if you really want to dive into that. The problem I have with Sapp is that those people who are trying to live right last week were shown that this is a joke. Many of these ministers don't even pay for their homes and their food, their utilities. I know the church that I grew up in, they had a parsonage, and that parsonage was paid for by the church. Many of them drive fancy cars. Many of them live in fancy houses. They're not doing the work of God. They're doing the work to pleasure themselves. Self-aggrandizement. They are worshipped by many of these congregants, their parishioners. And many of these parishioners will do whatever they need to do or whatever they're told in order to show pastor that I'm a good Christian. So many of them apparently online and in that sanctuary decided that they were going to pay. It was kind of like, I saw Juanita Bynum one time where she was milking the crowd, you know, and I've been in these services where they want to raise some money. Now, there's a difference if you're raising the money for a building fund, but still to make people feel guilty about how much you pay is another story altogether. I've been in those congregations. I've been in those services where we need to raise $20,000 a day. Raise your hand if you can give $1,000 right now. And some of those people will get up and they'll give the $1,000 because they're trying to be bold. They're trying to show off, knowing that they can't afford it. Can I get 10 people to give me $1,000? Can I get 5 people to give me $20,000? So can I get 10 people to give me $100? And so on and so forth. That's how they do it. You've been on it. If you are and you know what, and I would say if you are a black Christian, you've been in these services. But you know, white folks in these white services do it as well. It's an abomination. It's an abomination. And they're sitting up to, I'm praying. The Lord is telling me right now that somebody right now, can I get 10 folks to give me $500? Lord is saying there are 10 folks out there who want to give $500. That's what they do. And Marvin Sapp last night, bro, that was terrible. That was terrible. I don't know what church you're in, and a lot of people are, well, he was just trying to raise money. I don't care. If people don't have it, they don't have it. And you sure as hell have no business locking folks in until you get what you want. That is kidnapping. Now, I know none of those people will ever snitch on you, but how many people that were in that congregation last night or last week, whenever you did that, are no longer members of that church? How many people out there who were standing on the fence are now using that example as a means to show people, see, they're nothing but crooks? How many people? That's a legitimate question to ask. If you're really trying, look, you get your congregation and you build your congregation by your acts. And again, I'm telling you, I'm not trying to preach to you. But any social service, if you want people to support you, you get it by your acts. Not what you say, it's about what you do. Now, I don't know what Marvin Sapp does in the community, but part of the reason the Temple Church was so prominent, part of the reason the Temple Church had grown so fast and so big, and it had all of those people in it, young and old, black and white, was because the Temple Church was known for doing, not just saying. That was part of what Michael Lee Graves was all about. Now, I don't know what Marvin Sapp does. in his community. But what I do know, what he exhibited last week was an abomination. And it's a sad commentary on churches in general. When you have someone like that who's willing to bastardize his preaching in order to make money. Now, don't give me that argument, well, the white ones do it. Well, why are you there? Are you there to be like white people, or are you there to save your soul? These same churches are not even teaching black history. I've said over and over again, every black church ought to be teaching black history. And now that we're seeing more and more and more that the Trump administration, the criminal in chief, is trying to erase black history, we ought to be teaching black history every day. Every Sunday, there should be a black history moment. You should take 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15, whatever the case may be. Just like you do the announcements, there should be a black history moment. You should have a black history class. You should be inviting black history professors and scholars and people, and even your students who are in your community, in your congregation, who are young. Come up and present a black history moment for the congregation. That's what you ought to be doing, instead of trying to extort $40,000 from people who, in all likelihood, didn't have it. See, you have to understand, a lot of people who are in church can't afford it anyway. They're there for a blessing. Just like Dr. Graves blessed me, they're there for a blessing. They're not there to be extorted and kidnapped and locked in a church until you are satisfied that enough money has been raised. Yeah, you probably need to make the mortgage. You probably need to pay the utility bill. It goes on and on and on. But at the end of the day, extorting people like that does not serve a purpose at all. I was flabbergasted. And you should too. And many of my friends who are ministers should be upset with what happened. Because that should not be happening, brothers and sisters. It should not. Now, if you want to take the story that I gave in this first hour, the first segment of this hour, and use that to bless people, wonderful. You see, when Dr. Graves said, bring this money down here, he didn't say that I need it for utility bills. I need to pay the church mortgage. By the way, our church was paid off at the time. He didn't say that. He just said, I want you to bless someone today. I need you to reach in your pocket. And whatever you have, I don't want coins. I don't want checks. I want cash. Reach in your pockets and whatever you're green, whatever you can afford. He didn't say, bring me 10 people with $500. He didn't say 10 people who will give $1,000. He said, whatever you can give. Just whatever's in your pocketbook right now, I want you to take it and bring it down here and put it on this table, and we're going to all watch how you and all the others who bring money down here are going to bless some people today. And he did say lock the doors. He don't want anybody to leave because he want to show how God works. And whether he was Allah, God, whatever you believe that day, something worked in that church that day. That's how you do it. Because there I was, a young man standing on the fence. I was totally dedicated after that. Yes, I was. And many other people, even the people who didn't need the money, were dedicated because they saw people whom they thought were okay. Some of their friends and family members they thought were okay. They saw they needed a blessing and they were able to help them. That's what Marvin Sapp should have been doing, folks. Not trying to extort money. Not trying to extort money. little granny who's on Social Security, that she don't get a check for a month. She up there trying to bring money down there so you can get your $40,000. That was an abomination. We'll take a break. When we get back, we'll talk a little bit about Signalgate, and we'll talk a little bit more about what we must do. You're listening to Black Focus Radio. Our issues, our solutions, our voices on joynetradio.com.
Bake it, grill it, smoke it. Oh yeah, at reparations.com. Holman's Dynamic Pepper Juice is lighting fires around the country. It's the new product from reparations.com. Use it on meats and vegetables. Add it to your gumbos and greens for an extra punch. Made with all natural ingredients, Coleman's Dynamic Pepper Juice will enhance the flavors of your favorite recipes. Order today on reparations.com. And while there, be sure to check out some of our other great products. It's developed with love and care using the best all-natural ingredients with no GMOs or preservatives. From snacks to seasonings, Coleman's Dynamic Products has something for everyone. Bake it, grill it, smoke it. Oh yeah, at reparations.com.
Hey, beautiful. You look gorgeous. Are you doing something different? There's a healthy glow about you.
Thanks. I'm just my natural self.
Come on. What's your secret?
Okay. Since I found skintentional.com, I've been getting a lot of those comments.
Skintentional.com?
Yes. Skintentional.com is handcrafted, luxurious natural baths and body care products. Crafted for those with a designer's taste for high-quality skincare products but won't break your bank. From body butter to oils and soaps, Skintentional has something for everyone, including the man in your life. Get your man some beard balm and oils. And yes, they offer body butters and soap for him as well, without making him smell like flowers. Go to skintentional.com and check out their amazing products. They believe self-care should be an intentional and joyous experience for all. Skintentional.com.
Pigskin, check. Round ball, check. Hard ball, check. Hockey puck, check. Burning rubber, check. We got it all on the weekly sports page with David Coleman. What else do you need? Did I say food? Can't have sports without food. What kind of show is this again?
A sports show.
Oh, okay. Pass me those rib nuts.
Yeah, we do have it all, and a whole lot more with me, Dynamic David Coleman, on the weekly sports magazine.
Welcome back to Black Focus Radio. Our issues, our solutions, our voices. 855-525-5683 is the number. I appreciate you joining me. As always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, share it with a friend, tell a friend, and also don't forget to vote for me in the Carla Hall cooking contest. You'll be getting more information about that. Follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You'll see all of that as well. One other quick thing I want to talk about, then I want to talk quickly about Signalgate. The black twins that were killed, we're still looking for more information. By now, I hope you all have seen this story about Kadir and Nazir Lewis, two young black boys in Georgia who had planned a trip to Boston, never made the flight, and their bodies were found shot to death. The police quickly labeled it a murder-suicide. Many of the family members didn't accept that. A fireman who discovered the bodies, or at least went to pick up the bodies, has been fired because he took pictures and shared those pictures of those young men. The question is, why didn't they make their flight, and why were they up in the mountains in a place that they had never been? Nobody knows at this point. But the police have labeled it a murder-suicide. This is something that we need to keep our eyes on, folks, because we had another young black male a few months ago that was murdered as well. What's going on here? We need to start paying attention here. So I just wanted to throw that out before we finished up the show today. This last segment is called Signalgate. If you have not been paying attention, You know, this administration, I told you, it's going wild. They are now kidnapping people off the street and not giving them due process. They're flying people out of the country without giving them due process. This is what they're trying to do. They are desperate. They are desperate. So last week, it broke that the United States was about to bomb the Houthis in Yemen. And the attack plans were posted on Signal. Now, if you don't know what Signal is an app that is used by a lot of people because it's secure, and you can set those messages to disappear in a day, a week, a month, whatever the case may be. So much to our surprise, we didn't know that our government officials who were using top secret information was posting stuff like this on a commercial app. Now, let me quickly tell you how this works. You see, when you go get a computer or when you go get an app, that app goes to something called a server. That server duplicates that information thousands of times so that anyone who wants to access it can access it at the same time. Sometimes so many people are trying to access the same amount of data, it causes the server to crash. But when that server duplicates that information, it stores it on a server. So when you send in your girlfriend naked pictures or you send in your boyfriend naked pictures, that stuff is still on a server somewhere. Yeah, I'm sorry to say that, it is. And if somebody wanted to find it, they could. So if you're using a commercial app, that's how it works. So the temerity of these government officials, Pete Hegseth, and the DNI and all of these other officials in using this app to alert people that they were going to bomb Yemen, the Houthis in Yemen, is just spellbinding to me. It just shows you how stupid they are. And then last week I was watching the hearings and they were lying through their teeth. But we shouldn't be surprised because Donald Trump was lying through his teeth. He said he didn't even know about it. Wait a minute, aren't you the president? Hello? Just like those 4 Americans that were killed, that were missing. He said he didn't even know about it. So I decided, because I had heard of Signal, but I'm not one of those people who get into all these apps. I just don't do it. So I decided to go out and download Signal the other day just for the heck of it. It's crazy, man. And then here's what really boggled my mind about all of this stuff. Is they tried to say that it wasn't classified. Now, I've never been in the military. I have someone that's very close to me who is an ex-military person who works in the government secretly. Okay? And he said, "Yeah, that stuff's classified." You've heard pilots say, "Yeah, that stuff's classified." If you're telling people the type of weapons you're using, what time you're going to start dropping bombs, what type of aircraft you're using, all of that stuff, that is mission information that any dummy would know that is classified information. So why the hell do we have government officials posting this crap on a commercial app and then lying to the American people? This is where we are. This is why we've got to start paying attention. And I say all of that to say this: what we must do is get out of those apps that is corrupting our minds. That I see young people walking down the street just in a whirlwind of lostness. Looking at their phones, not paying attention, about to walk off the sidewalk, get your butt knocked off. All of that because we're not paying attention to the things that matter. You're not paying attention that the funding for the National Civil Rights Museum is about to be cut. You're not paying attention that they are trying to start a constitutional convention whereas that they can start or take away some of the amendments in the Constitution or amend the Constitution. You're not paying attention that they are kidnapping citizens and students off the streets simply because they have a point of view. And Marco Rubio are calling these people thugs simply because they are expressing their First Amendment right. So let me ask you a question. Maybe that doesn't concern you. Maybe you say that, well, that person was a Palestinian and they don't belong here anyway. Well, if they can charge, they being the Trump administration, that someone's free speech is terroristic, then what happens when you want to protest about civil rights? What happens when you want to protest about LGBTQ rights? What happens when you want to protest about women's rights? What happens? Because, you know, when they came for my friend, I said nothing. When they came for the neighbor, I said nothing. And then they came for me. And there was no one to speak for me. Now, I'm paraphrasing the Jewish poem that was written. But you have to understand that once they're able to get away with it, and that's why these courts are so important. Once they're able to get away with deporting people who they don't like, or deporting people that don't have their same points of view, then guess what? We are truly in an oligarchy. We are truly in a state where our democracy is no longer here. So what you got to do, folks, is you got to continue these boycotts. You got to get to the polls. You've got to register and make sure your friends are registered. You've got to start strategizing, because this Project 2025 was strategized for years, unbeknownst to the people that were supposed to be leading the Democratic Party. You didn't know about it, and now we're seeing that they're instituting all of these things that they wanted to in the first place. Yeah, we've got to do something about this. We've got to institute term limits so that we won't have people that are in power and making money off the public dole. You see, they're cutting all of these public programs. They're cutting all of these government jobs, but they're not cutting their jobs. Have y'all figured that out yet? These Republicans are go Elon, go Elon. But yeah, guess what? They ain't talking about term limits. What we must do more than anything else right now is wake the hell up. I'm reminded at the end of school days when Lawrence Fishburne was screaming in the camera, "Wake up! Wake up!" That's what we've got to do. We've got to stop hating one another. We got to start supporting one another. I keep saying this over and over again, but until we do, we're going to be in a tight shape. They're coming after us. This is not a joke. This is not a conspiracy theory. You can simply look at the things that the criminal in chief are talking about giving reparations to people who tried to overthrow the government, talking about killing the National Civil Rights Museum, talking about killing textbooks, trying to convene a constitutional convention without the knowledge of a lot of people. Yeah, this is called white supremacy. You see, the DEI that we should be concerned about is what we just witnessed in Signalgate, and we continue to see every day. That's the DEI. It's amazing how they try to pretend. It's projection, that's the word. They project on others what they really are, and we don't even see it. That's sad. That's sad. Well, on that note, we've got to get out here. I hope you enjoyed the show. I certainly did as well. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Don't forget to look for the link in the post that is going to give you information on the cooking event that I'm involved in with Carla Hall. We'll talk to you soon. You have a great day. Thank you for listening to Black Focus Radio. Our issues, our solutions, our voices on joynetradio.com.
You've been listening to Black Focus, where we discuss our issues with our solutions and our voices. Join us every weekday afternoon at 1 p.m. on joynetradio.com.